I spent 7 years working on Frankie, on Jakob Frank. And more or less after 5 years, I could say that I understand Jakob Frank, that I knew who he was, what kind of person he was, what was his historical milieu. Now I've been working on Eibeshütz, I've been reading Eibeshütz probably for 10 years. I've been intensively working on Eibeshütz for the past 4 years. And the more I work on him, the less I understand. If at the beginning I had some ideas who was this man, what kind of person he was, and I have a feeling that I know less and less. This is the first thing. I'm knowing much more. I'm much more puzzled than I was at the beginning. Now, having said that, I do think that there are, first of all, there are direct lines you can show. For instance, Halperin is quoted in Aaron twice. There is one sermon on the head of Esau being buried in Hebron, which brings is in the second volume of Aaron and it brings a quote from Halperin. There is another sermon which discusses Neshamot Gerim, the soul of the convert, the world being created from the souls of the converts to Judaism, and this also comes up in the Aaron Tvash. There are other things. In Eibeshütz's other works, I can show continuity. I can show that he is going back to the same ideas, right? Maybe it should be said, Halperin is his first text. Eibeshütz is quite unique. And even if you look at the halachic stuff, even if you look at Kreti Ufleti or Urim Vatumi, right? Everyone who read these works would say that there's something very strange about the way he combines people, right? Contemporary halakha. We're in the mid 18th century, basically abandons this populistic arguments and tries to rationalize much more instead of going in this endless. There is something about Eibeshütz which sets him apart from contemporary writers. And then there is his engagement with the Christian world, right? The fact that he's not only does he have a theology of Christianity, but he's probably, to the best of my knowledge, he's the only 18th century rabbi who really studies Christian theology and quotes it and refers to it. Right? Emden reads Emden also has the engagement with Christianity, but for Emden the engagement with Christianity is the engagement with the New Testament. He would not read contemporary Protestant theology. Eibeshütz does, and he's very much in dialogue with his contemporary world. So maybe Eibeshütz should be seen more in the context. More in the synchronic perspective, right? The man of the mid-18th century in dialogue with his environment, and not as someone who is at the end of the line of development of great rabbis. And finally, to your question about Jewish exile and universal exile, I don't think it's getting lost there. I do think that at the end of the day, the exile is about the lower ranks of divinity, that is to say, the God of Israel and the Shekhinah, and it is the theme which comes up here, also comes up in the sermons. I think there is something special about the Jews. Right? Even if it is not the only true religion, if it is not the best religion or the highest religion and so on and so forth.
I would take my text from an earlier paper of yours, in which you write that Lutheran missionaries from Halle who met Eibeshitz reported that he had studied the writings of the radical pietist and member of the Moravian Brethren, Johann Christian Edelmann, and that he expounded Lutheran theology to the students of his yeshiva. Now, that, by coincidence, I happened to be reading a book by Marsha Keith Schuchard, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, called William Blake's Sexual Path to Spiritual Vision, in which she traces the sexuality in Blake's poetry and art to his parents' involvement with a Moravian congregation in London. Now, granted, most of the stuff she talks about are from the middle of the 18th century. But I wonder if the sorts of things she talks about, like the theology of the wounds of Christ, which crops up in Va'avo Hayomer Ha'ayin, was part of the Moravian heritage. Now, I stated, and I will correct an inaccuracy in my paper, I stated in a footnote that Eibeshitz grew up in Poland. He, in fact, he was born in around 1690, and when he was about 12, his family moved to Eibenschütz in Moravia. And between then and his coming to Prague, he was in different places in Moravia, and saw himself as part of a persecuted religion, both as a Jew in Christian society and as a Shabbatian sympathizer in Jewish society. Is it not thinkable that he would have seen the Moravians as a, what would you call it? The only word I can come up with is landsmen. You know, the sort of brothers under the skin. And would have been open to some sort of a synthesis with them. Because when you talk about, if this book by Marsha Schuchard is right, and you can tell my expertise in this area from my referring to this book plus Wikipedia, but if this is right, then it would appear to me that the eroticism, the erotic obsessions, could have easily been influenced by the Moravians.
This is fantastic. This is terrific. if I can, the ignorant, let me can add something is that when he met Moravian thinkers or read Moravian writings, he found there a very different Christianity than he would have found reading what he could call supersessionist understandings of Jews. That is, the Moravians had an innovative, in many ways innovative understanding of Jews and of the obligations of Christians towards Jews. And in fact, the Moravians are they are the founders, not just parents, but founders of the movement to missionize the Jews. And as far as the European continent is concerned, and separation from Britain, they are also the first movements of Europeans to try and restore the Jews to Zion. So we can, I don't know if that would have influenced it, but he obviously met also Christians who were not hostile towards Jews and who would have certainly wanted to converse with them. That's my again, this is just a guess. I don't know the details, but I think the fact that we're talking about Moravians in the 18th century is very, very meaningful. Halle became a center for Protestant interest in the Jews.
Pavel speaks of the more he studies Eibeshitz, the less he understands. I find this man a mystery beyond mystery.
So I have two questions. I hope you'll give me a chance to ask them both, because one follows on Ruth's comments. I was also curious about, particularly in relation to David's paper, the relationship between this esoteric and cosmological discussion of sex, and then what you seem to be taking as an equivalent to, you called it liberal pieties of the 21st century. So actual human sex. And so I was wondering about the separation that would have existed between those for these 18th century figures, particularly since, as Pavel described, the Mannheim, I think, Hasidim Shula was particularly interested in ascetic practices. So I'm curious about how these different facets fit together. And you were also describing the Sabbatite Tzvi and that sort of mystical union, right, where there's not actually sex happening on a physical level. So I'm curious also, like Ruth, about the aesthetic dimensions of these movements and how do we fit those together with these texts that are very explicit. That's on the one hand. The other question I have is, how did these 18th century Sabbateans see their own Judaism? And I was fascinated by the descriptions, probably that you gave, of the statements that Eibeshitz would make, which, as you said, at the least are a weak sort of rejection of Sabbatite Tzvi, and at the most is sort of embracing it in a secret way. So there seems to be this kind of secret knowledge among this elite, and that there's no problem. There's no problem with that. They don't need to be martyrs, and yet can remain Jewish. These are not very coherent comments, but I wonder if you could sort of flesh out what's their relationship to the more standard Judaism. How would they see themselves, and how do they understand this Sabbateanism? Is it the secret knowledge like Kabbalah, which doesn't need to be, they don't need to disseminate in the sense of being missionaries?
It's a similar portion in some ways about the place of Judaism in that world.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Asking, yes.
I guess all I could say was, yeah, I'd like to know too. I mean, I just don't know.